My beloved, do not rush past this moment. Something has been waiting quietly at the edge of your awareness, and what you are about to hear was meant to reach the part of you that has been asking questions in silence. You may have felt it already, a strange distance, an unexplained shift, a subtle change in the energy surrounding the person you care about. Perhaps you could not name it. Perhaps you told yourself you were imagining things. Yet somewhere beneath all those thoughts, your heart kept returning to one question: has someone else captured their attention? Stay here, because the answer is not as simple as fear would make it seem, and before this message reaches its final moment, something hidden will begin to make sense in a way you did not expect. There are times when attention moves before the heart understands why. A person can notice someone, become curious about someone, or feel drawn toward a new presence without immediately knowing what that attraction truly means. That is why you must not allow one unfinished piece of the story to become the entire story in your mind. What has been unfolding around your loved one is layered. There is another presence in their emotional world, yes, but heaven would have you look deeper before deciding what that means. Because this situation is not merely about another person appearing. It is about what that person awakened, what your loved one remembered because of them, and what suddenly became impossible for your loved one to ignore. Something changed recently. It may not have happened dramatically. There may have been no confession, no obvious moment, no scene that anyone around them would have recognized as important. It could have begun with a conversation that lasted only a few minutes, a shared glance, an unexpected kindness, a familiar laugh, or a simple moment when your loved one felt understood. Yet afterward, they carried that interaction with them longer than they expected. They replayed something that was said. They wondered why it stayed in their mind. They questioned why someone they barely intended to notice suddenly occupied a little more emotional space than before. And that is where the mystery begins, because the real reason has far less to do with replacing you than you might assume. Your loved one has been living with an internal conflict they have not fully expressed. On one side is what they feel. On the other is what they believe they are supposed to do with those feelings. There are things between you that remain unfinished. Words that were never spoken, emotions that were disguised as silence, misunderstandings that were left sitting where honest conversation should have been. At times, your loved one has wondered whether they should keep waiting for clarity or force themselves to move forward. They have asked themselves questions they would never easily admit aloud. Are you still emotionally connected to them? Would things be different if they reached out? Did they misread something? Were they holding on to a possibility that only existed in their imagination? Those questions created an empty space, and when another person appeared with warmth, attention, or understanding, your loved one noticed. But there is something remarkable hidden inside this. Instead of making them forget you, this new attention has forced them to compare what they feel now with what they felt with you. They expected distraction. They expected relief. They thought perhaps another conversation, another connection, another possibility would finally quiet the part of them that kept returning to your memory. Yet the opposite began to happen. Every time this person showed interest, your loved one became more aware of the qualities they once associated with you. Every time someone else listened to them, they remembered the way they wished you understood them. Every time another person offered emotional closeness, a strange question rose inside them: why does this still not feel the same? That question unsettled them. There is a reason they have not rushed to answer it. Your loved one is afraid of discovering that what they tried to dismiss was deeper than they admitted. It is easier to tell yourself that something ended because timing was wrong, because distance became too great, because communication broke down, because life became complicated. It is much harder to face the possibility that the emotional bond remained underneath all of it. And now another person has unintentionally become a mirror. Not because that person came to steal something from you, but because their presence exposed something your loved one had been avoiding. You may imagine them sitting somewhere, completely captivated by this new person, forgetting everything that existed before. But the emotional reality is far more complicated. There have been moments when your loved one smiled during a conversation and then became strangely quiet afterward. Moments when they enjoyed someone's company yet found themselves thinking of you once they were alone. Moments when a new possibility should have felt exciting, but instead created a painful comparison they did not ask for. Something inside them keeps measuring every new connection against a standard they never consciously chose. And that standard carries traces of you. Do not misunderstand what this means. This is not a promise that your loved one will behave exactly as you hope. Human beings possess choice. Feelings can be complicated, and relationships are built through honesty, consistency, and mutual action, not merely longing. But in this fictional spiritual story, heaven is drawing your attention toward a deeper emotional truth: the appearance of another person is not always the ending people fear. Sometimes it becomes the moment that reveals what was hidden. Your loved one has begun to see themselves differently. That is the part no one around them fully understands. For a long time, they may have believed that the uncertainty between you was mostly about circumstances. They may have blamed timing, pride, distance, responsibilities, family expectations, old wounds, or simple confusion. Yet this new person has challenged that explanation. Because now your loved one is being given what they once claimed they needed: attention, availability, conversation, perhaps even admiration, and still something feels incomplete. That realization has made them revisit old memories with a new level of honesty. They remember small details. Not only the dramatic moments. Not only the arguments or the beautiful conversations. They remember ordinary things. The way you reacted when something made you laugh, the tone of your voice when you were trying not to show emotion, a message you once sent that they pretended did not affect them, a moment when they sensed you cared more than you were willing to say. They remember something you did that seemed insignificant at the time but now feels strangely meaningful. Memory has become selective, pulling forward the moments they once overlooked. And here is where the story becomes even more unexpected. The person who caught their attention may have said something about you without even knowing it. Not your name. Not your story. Not directly. But perhaps they described the kind of relationship they wanted. Perhaps they spoke about regret, honesty, timing, or the danger of losing someone because of pride. Perhaps they told a story about missing an opportunity with someone they once loved. Maybe they asked your loved one a question that landed too close to the truth. Is there someone you never really got over? It may have been asked casually, even jokingly, but your loved one did not know how to answer. Because your face appeared in their mind before they could stop it. They may have changed the subject. They may have laughed. They may have given a vague answer. But internally, something opened. That was the moment this new person stopped being merely a distraction and became an unexpected catalyst. Your loved one began asking themselves what they actually wanted instead of what seemed easiest. And the answers frightened them, not because something terrible was coming, but because truth demands responsibility. If they admit they still care about you, then they must face why they stayed silent. If they admit another person cannot simply erase what existed, then they must confront whether they are willing to risk honesty. If they admit they have been waiting for a sign from you while pretending they had moved on, they must also admit that pride has cost them more than they expected. There is something else. The new person has noticed the hesitation. People can sense when someone's heart is not fully present. They can hear it in unfinished sentences. They can feel it when enthusiasm suddenly disappears. They can recognize when a person's eyes seem to go somewhere far away during a conversation. Whether they understand the reason or not, this individual has begun to recognize that your loved one carries emotional history that has not been settled. That realization may soon lead to a conversation. And that conversation is one of the reasons this message feels so urgent. Imagine the scene. Your loved one is trying to act composed. The other person asks a simple question. Perhaps it begins with, "Can I ask you something?" Your loved one agrees, expecting nothing serious. Then comes the question they have been avoiding: is there still someone else in your heart? Silence. Not because your loved one does not know the answer. Because suddenly they know it too well. They may hesitate. Their expression may change. They may look away. And for the first time, the person who caught their attention may realize that they were never competing with another stranger. They were standing beside a memory that never fully left. But do not assume you already know what happens next. Because there is another layer. Your loved one has also been questioning whether you still want them in your life at all. This is where their uncertainty becomes powerful. They may remember occasions when they wanted to reach out but convinced themselves not to. They feared arriving too late. They feared discovering you had moved on. They feared being rejected after finally becoming vulnerable. So instead of risking clarity, they allowed ambiguity to remain. Then someone else appeared. And suddenly doing nothing began to feel like a decision. That is what has shaken them. When there was no other possibility around them, your loved one could postpone confronting their feelings indefinitely. They could tell themselves there would always be another day, another chance, another moment when everything would become clearer. But now the presence of someone new has created emotional contrast. It has forced them to ask whether they are moving forward because they genuinely want something new, or because they are afraid to return to something unfinished. That distinction changes everything. Your loved one is beginning to understand that loneliness and readiness are not the same thing. Being noticed is not the same as being deeply known. Receiving attention is not the same as feeling at home with someone. And attraction, however real, does not automatically erase emotional history. This does not make the new person insignificant. In fact, they may be sincere. They may be kind. They may genuinely admire your loved one. And that is exactly why the situation has become difficult. If this person were obviously wrong for them, your loved one could dismiss everything without reflection. But because there may be something genuinely good in this new connection, your loved one is being forced into greater honesty. They cannot simply say, "No one else interests me." Someone did. Yet even that interest revealed something they did not expect. Your loved one discovered that part of their heart still turns toward you when the room becomes quiet. They discovered that attention from another person can feel flattering without feeling complete. They discovered that moving forward physically is easier than moving forward emotionally. Most of all, they discovered that the story they told themselves about you may not have been the whole truth. There was a moment, perhaps very recently, when your loved one almost said your name. Maybe someone asked why they seemed distracted. Maybe a friend noticed they were checking their phone. Maybe a song played, a place reminded them of you, or a phrase brought back a memory. Your loved one nearly confessed what was happening inside them. But they stopped. They were not ready to explain why someone who might not even be present in their daily life could still influence the choices they were making. And yet that silence did not bring peace. It made the feeling louder. This is where heaven, within this fictional message, asks you not to chase shadows. Do not let your mind invent scenes you cannot verify. Do not reduce yourself to a competition. Your worth does not become smaller because someone else noticed the person you care about. The deeper invitation here is to see that real emotional connection cannot be secured through panic. It must be met through truth. If you and your loved one are ever meant to rebuild something, it will not happen because you defeated another person. It will happen because both of you chose honesty over pride, clarity over guessing, and consistent action over fantasy. Your loved one is approaching that crossroads. One path allows them to explore the new attention and see where it leads. The other requires them to face what they still feel about you. But there is also a third path, the one people rarely discuss. They may temporarily step away from both possibilities because they realize they cannot make a sincere choice while emotionally divided. That option has crossed their mind. And it surprised even them. They expected the arrival of someone new to simplify everything. Instead, it made them question everything. They began noticing how much of their behavior was influenced by fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of reaching back. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of choosing incorrectly. Fear of discovering that the person they still care about may no longer be waiting. But something happened that gave them a clue. They heard something about you. Perhaps through a mutual connection. Perhaps through social media. Perhaps through a passing comment. Perhaps they simply noticed that your energy seemed different, that you looked stronger, calmer, more focused, less available to the past. Whatever the source, it triggered an emotional reaction they did not expect. For the first time, they wondered whether you might truly be moving on. And suddenly the attention they were receiving from someone else no longer felt like the most important development. The possibility of losing access to you became more emotionally powerful than the thrill of being noticed by someone new. That realization created a quiet panic, not the kind that becomes chaos, but the kind that forces reflection. Your loved one began reviewing the decisions that brought them here. They remembered the message they almost sent. The apology they drafted but never delivered. The question they wanted to ask. The moment they waited for you to make the first move. They remembered how many times both of you may have been standing on opposite sides of silence, each hoping the other would cross first. And now someone else is standing near that space. But here is the twist. The new person may not be trying to separate you at all. They may actually become the one who encourages honesty. Imagine your loved one finally admitting, "There is someone from my past I still think about." And imagine the unexpected response, "Then why are you here pretending you don't?" That question would be difficult to ignore. Sometimes truth comes through the person you least expect. The one who catches someone's attention can also become the one who makes them confront where their heart is truly pointing. Your loved one may not yet have answered that question aloud, but internally they have begun to. They are seeing that connection is not measured only by who is physically closest. It is measured by what remains when distraction disappears. When everyone goes home, when conversations stop, when the phone is silent, when there is nothing left to perform, whose presence remains in the mind? And lately, that answer has disturbed them. Because it keeps returning to you. Not perfectly. Not without confusion. Not without memories of what hurt. But still you. There are things they would change if they could go backward. A conversation they would handle differently. A moment they wish they had stayed instead of withdrawing. Something they said too quickly. Something they failed to say soon enough. Your loved one has started seeing that their silence once felt protective, but now it feels expensive. And the person who caught their attention has unknowingly made that price visible. Yet another revelation is approaching. Your loved one is beginning to suspect that you misunderstood their silence. They worry you may have interpreted distance as indifference. They worry you believe they forgot you more easily than they did. They worry that if they come back now, you will ask the question they are least prepared to answer. Why did it take someone else entering the picture for you to realize what I meant to you? They have no easy response. Because perhaps they already knew. Maybe the new person did not create the feeling. Maybe they simply removed your loved one's ability to hide from it. There is a difference. And soon that difference may be spoken aloud. Your loved one has considered reaching out, not necessarily with a dramatic declaration, but with something small. A simple message. A casual question. A reaction to something you shared. They may test the emotional temperature before revealing more. Yet every time they imagine doing it, they wonder what you would hear beneath the words. Would you recognize the hesitation? Would you sense the longing? Would you know they are not contacting you because they suddenly became bored, but because something inside them has reached a point where avoidance is becoming harder than honesty? This is why you should watch actions more closely than imagined signs. If they truly want to rebuild something with you, eventually their choices must become clearer. Real care can be tender, but it cannot remain permanently hidden behind mystery. Your loved one is approaching the moment when they must decide whether their feelings deserve action. The other person may be approaching a decision too. They have begun to understand that your loved one cannot offer their full heart while part of it remains unresolved. And they may soon say something that changes the entire direction of this story. Perhaps they will step away. Perhaps they will ask for honesty. Perhaps they will reveal that they already knew about you. Yes, already knew. That possibility is closer than your loved one realizes. There may have been a moment when your loved one mentioned you indirectly. A story that sounded casual. A memory disguised as an anecdote. A complaint with too much emotion behind it. The new person may have noticed immediately that whoever you were, you mattered. They may even have asked, "Who was that?" Your loved one avoided giving a full answer. But the hesitation answered enough. Now imagine what happens when your loved one finally discovers that this person has understood the truth all along. The conversation may begin calmly. The other person may say, "I think I know why you've been holding back." Your loved one will ask what they mean. Then your name, or the description of you, will enter the room. Everything changes. Your loved one will realize that the emotions they thought they were hiding have been visible from the beginning. And what happens after that may force them to make the decision they have postponed for far too long. Because the person who caught their attention is about to ask them a question that may leave no room for comfortable silence. Not, "Do you like me?" Not, "Do you miss them?" But something much deeper. A question that could expose whether your loved one is truly ready to release the past, or whether the person they have been trying hardest not to choose is still the person they would choose if fear disappeared. And, my beloved child, just before that question is asked, your loved one is going to hear something about you that they were never expecting to hear, something that may completely change the answer they were about to give.